Hi guys, so further to the video that I've just put out about Macs not being up to date, I've been doing a little more digging and I want to share with you what I've found, which is that not only have Apple not really updated their laptops in over a year, they're massively overcharging for what you get. It's absolutely ridiculous. And what I'm going to do is I picked just a PC laptop brand. One of the main ones, I picked Lenovo. I don't have a Lenovo laptop, never had one, but I've looked at the specs and I found one of their latest laptops, the Ideapad 700. And I'm just going to go through and I'm going to put a couple of links in the description below. And I'm going to put this up on screen and we're going to compare the specs of the Macbook Pro, the top of the range one that's available right now, that is £2,000, against the Lenovo Ideapad 700 that's available now, that is, as configured, £850, so less than half the money. Now let's see if we get less than half the product. So, moving past all the blurb on the Lenovo, and past all the way down to the tech specs. That's what I want to see. Okay, here we go. So there's tech specs up to blah, 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 up to this, up to that. Right, here's what I want, which is the actual price of the option that we have. Okay, so the processor here is an Intel Core i7, which, like I said, i3, i5 and i7, they're only really comparable per generation. This is a 6700 HQ. Now, the 6 means it's a Skylake, which means it's the most recently available, latest hardware, absolutely as powerful as you can get. And it's a 2.6 gigahertz Skylake quad core, so it's an absolute monster. Just to give you a reference, my rack-based studio computer, which I'll link a video to here as I was building it, has a Skylake 6700 desktop processor in it, and I can throw every track, every VST, every plugin that I use on an entire mix, all of it at this processor without having to pause, freeze, play with latency. It's the quickest, most absolutely rock-solid, reliable processor I've ever had. And you can get that in this laptop for less than £1,000. Now, let's compare that to the MacBook Pro. Let's just change tabs. Now, I'm using everymac.com because Apple don't tell you their own details of their specs, which I think is terrible. Now, this is a 2.5 gigahertz processor, which is already slightly underclocked compared to the other one that we just looked at, the Lenovo. And it's a Haswell / Crystalwell. So it's a Haswell processor, which means it's from the 4th generation. Let's find an exact number. It's a 4870 HQ, which means it's 4th generation. So it's technically 2 generations old, and even clock for clock it's not as fast as the one in the Lenovo, so it's slower and it won't be nearly as power efficient and it won't be as data efficient. I mean, it's not going to be a bad processor, I'm not saying that. A 4870 HQ should be fine, but something I've always worried about with Macs is there's almost no venting on the back, which means that if a quad-core processor like this gets hot, where does that go? It can't get out quick enough. But that's a separate issue for another day. So let's look at memory. This is where the Mac scores a point, because the total memory... Oh, no. Oh, here's a big one. So, on every Mac. So, this Mac has 16 gigabytes of RAM, which is one thing. Okay. But that's 1600 megahertz DDR3, which means it's not the latest generation, it's the generation previously, and it cannot be upgraded later. It's soldered in. What you have is what you have for the rest of the life of this machine. You get to a few years down the line and there's a new operating system and it wants more RAM. Tough. Tough. Whereas looking at the Lenovo, this only has 8GB of memory that ships with it, but it's DDR4, which means it's the latest memory, and it's over 2000 megahertz, so it's already faster than the RAM that's in the Mac, and I'm confident that that will be upgradable, which means that for not much more money you can get another 8GB of RAM, and that's the easiest upgrade to make as well. You usually just take a flap off the back of a laptop and you just pop in the other 8 and there's 16, and that's probably less than £1,000 all in, including that. Now back to the drive on this. So the hard drive on the Mac is going to be, I think it's a 500GB model. Yeah, so it's 512GB of solid state storage, which is great. Again, that's fine. But the Lenovo has 128GB of PCIe solid state, which is a quarter of that. But it also has a terabyte just standard hard drive in there as well, which means that the SSD, if you don't know the difference, the SSD is much faster, and that's where you'd put Windows or Mac OS and all your system files. But the size of the storage becomes important for guys like us, the audio producers. Say you've got something like Native Instruments Complete. If I install Complete Ultimate, that's nearly 300GB gone. If I decide that I need to install everything on a machine, just in case I want to be inspired and use some new instruments, or a client, in my case, says, oh, have you got some pianos, or have you got some organ sounds, or whatever, that's going to knock out on the Mac most of your hard drive. And including that and something like Pro Tools and Logic, that's your hard drive full before you've even made any songs. At least with the Lenovo, you can put things like Complete and all the VSTs and sample libraries on a separate drive and keep them separate so that they're not going to fill up your system drive and bring everything to a crashing halt. And you will have plenty of space for hundreds of tracks in their entire uncompressed glory. Now, what else have we got that's absolutely awful? Let's have a look. So they've both got Wi-Fi, AC Wi-Fi and Bluetooth 4.0, that's fine. The graphics, this is going to be an interesting one because I like using a dedicated graphics card for audio production, because I think there's a possibility it can bring problems with latency down, but we're talking like silly short latencies, like 64 samples or 128. Now, the Lenovo has a GeForce 940M, 2GB of onboard memory. Now that, in my opinion, is absolutely plenty for audio production, because some of your plugins have got some pretty interfaces. There's no 3D involved. There's no heavy lifting. Now the MacBook either uses its Crystalwell Iris 5200 Pro graphics, which is, again, a generation old, or it has on board an AMD Radeon R9 370X, which means that's going to be a power-hungry monster, and if that gets enabled in the middle of audio production, if you're on battery, you're not going to last very long. I think that's pretty much brought us to the end of what's important, because depending on whether you're okay with working with Windows, or if you insist on OS X, or whichever way round, DAWs, for me, are identical on both systems. I have a Mac in the office where we have Reaper installed. I've used Logic and Cubase and Pro Tools, and the plugins that I use are absolutely identical, and the programs I use are identical between Windows and Mac. I mean, me and Chris in the office, who's using a MacBook, we can send each other projects, and as long as we have the same plugins installed, It doesn't even care if we're on Windows or OS X anymore. So my advice to you, if you're looking at getting yourself a new laptop, is don't get a Mac right now. We'll do another video again. Like I said, we'll do another video when the new Macs come out, probably within the next couple of months. But for now, I'd go with a Lenovo because I get a bigger screen. I get a 17-inch laptop, which means I can see all my tracks and all my waveforms without having to squint at it. And I mean, yes, the Mac's got Retina, but you don't need that kind of pixel density. You need to be able to see it clearly with your eyes, not squinting in at this infinitely deep thing. And the non-upgradability of the Mac is terrible, where at least with the Lenovo you can upgrade the memory afterwards, and it won't cost you an arm and a leg just because it's a Mac. Hope you found this useful. If you disagree with me, and you probably will, leave it in the comments. I'd love to hear what your opinion is. Hit like, that's really appreciated. Subscribe to the channel if you want to see more of this kind of tech talk. We also do drum production videos, guitar, amp and speaker comparisons, and we're also a fully fledged recording studio, so if you want to talk to me about coming in and recording your album with us, let me know. Thanks for watching. I'll see you soon.